point that it would risk his life to fast, like extremely weak, it would also be haram on him to be fasting, because Allah Azza wa Jal says, وَلَا تَقْتُلُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ وَكَانَ اللَّهُ بِكُمْ رَحِيمًا. And do not kill yourselves or subject yourself to death when Allah is ever merciful with you. If this would be torture for a person, then no. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَغَنِيٌّ عَنْ تَعْذِيبِ هَذَا نَفْسَهُ. The Prophet ﷺ once said in a hadith, go tell that man, Allah has no need for him to torment himself, to put himself through that. Not about fasting, but the principle is one. The context in which he said that was someone who vowed to fast while standing in the sun and not sit and not drink, and just overexerting without reason is not sanctioned in the deen. So those are those exempt from fasting in a sense that they're not allowed to fast. Then you move on to the more common categories of exemption. Allah Azza wa Jalla says in the Quran, فَمَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ مَرِيضًا أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ فَعِدَّةٌ مِنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرَ. That whomever of you is sick or traveling, then an equal amount of days at a later time, they can make them up at that point. So those that are sick. Who are those that are sick? According to the majority of scholars, it is those who will be significantly harmed by fasting. They will not die, but still, they will get worse, or their current state of sickness will be prolonged. It will delay their shifa, delay their cure. Those people are all exempt from fasting, and they are to make it up at a later time. And don't think sick just in terms of diagnosis, right? Something that's clinically categorized in the, what do they call DSMs? So only psychiatric. Okay. So long as it doesn't have an official term by which they bucket it in the medical practitioner's world, it's not the only sickness we mean here. So the elderly, for example, if you're too weak in old age to be fasting when Ramadan winds up in the longer days, in the summer days, then you make it up in the shorter days. And if someone is too weak to even make it up, right, they can consider themselves chronically exempt or like permanently exempt. And in that case, they would just feed one poor person for each day that Ramadan happened to be that year. So that year you'd feed 29 days, 29 people or 30 people. And we commonly mention Anas ibn Malik used to do that. When he got very old, he lived to be near or past 100 years old. On the last day of Ramadan, he would just invite 29 or 30 people to his house, feed them all a meal, and you're finished. You can do that, or you can just feed on the safer view, the Hanafi view, just a sa', which is basically 2.2 pounds, right? No, a sa' is essentially half a kilogram, but in the safer opinion, just do a whole kilogram, 2 sa', which you don't have to measure yourself. You can just go to these relief websites and authorize them to do it for you. You just do what's called fidya, ransom, and case closed. You don't need to do these calculations that I'm reviewing in my head as I speak. That's if you can't make it up. And likewise, not just the elderly, the women that are nursing, they're not technically sick, right? Or the women that are pregnant may not be technically sick, but they are weak, so weak that they cannot fast. It would harm them, the physician told them, or they know their body, they will be harmed by it, or their child will be harmed, right, in their stomach, or she will not lactate, she will not be making enough milk. All of those will be exempt from fasting as analogies to the sick person, right? And they would all basically make it up if they can. If not, the ransom option, the fidya option, one poor person, or the sa' staple food option is there as the plan B. Those are the short answers. The last thing is the traveler, right? Yeah. The traveler is exempt even if there's no hardship. That's why we're explaining him separately or her separately. So long as you're allowed to be traveling, right? You're not going to do something haram, because then you get no exceptions, no concessions, no rukhas. And so long as you're not like trying to be a wise guy about it, let me drive a few extra miles, right, just to consider myself traveling so that I don't have to fast today. No, a true traveler, by the definition that you adhere to of traveling, according to the 4 madhabs, it's basically, traveling 50 miles, essentially. It is about 50 miles, 80 kilos, 50 miles, and leaving your city limits. That's the definition I would refer you to if you don't have one. Then in that case, the moment you leave the city, you can break your fast. Okay? You can. You don't have to, but you can. if you're a traveler, the type of travel you would shorten your prayer in, then you can break your fast. There are a few others that it goes without saying they're exempted, like the insane person obviously is exempted, because if he doesn't know he's obligated to fast, Allah won't ask him, why didn't you fast, right? The child, because children, the pen is lifted from children, the hadith says, right? The pen of sins, by the way. If the child were to fast, good, knowing what he's doing, or she's doing, good deeds would be written for them, right? But they would not be accountable for not fasting. And of course, the Sahaba used to encourage their children to fast. Hadith in Sahih Bukhari, not just Ramadan, even the day of Ashura. And when the kid would cry, they would distract them with lu'batan min al-'ayn, she said, and we would give them a wool toy, teddy bear basically, right? Distract them to help them, continue on, until it is Maghrib time. So training our children to take part in these devotional acts actually is an act of mercy, because you're making it easier on your kids to uphold these things at a later age, right? That's all. Are there any questions?